Well, good morning. Let me extend my welcome to worship this morning. My name is Adam Hildebrand, and I get to be one of the pastors here at LVfirst. It is such a joy to be worshiping with all of you this morning, whether you're joining us here in person or you're joining us online. That hour of sleep maybe caught up with you, and you're joining us from a different place. We're just excited for any opportunity that we have to be together. If you're new here this morning, I just want to extend a special welcome to you. So glad you're here. So glad you're a part of worship. We'd love to connect with you. We'd love to hear a little bit of your story and have a chance to share a little bit of our story, what this church is up to in the world, because we're doing a lot in this community, doing a lot here in the church. But today we're kicking off a new series we're calling Flip the Script. And throughout the season of Lent, we're going to be journeying together through the Book of Philippians. And we're going to go a lot slower than we went last month when we ran through the Book of Luke. Philippians is a short book. It's only 4 chapters. So you could read it every day throughout Lent and still learn more and more. Like, you have it memorized by the end of Lent. I don't know, like maybe that's your thing. I would encourage you to do that. It's an incredible book, an incredible letter that Paul writes to a group of faithful followers. But I was thinking about Philippians and thinking about this idea of flipping the script. And any time the markets kind of fluctuate like they have been over the last month or so, I for whatever reason in my Facebook and YouTube algorithm, I get lots of investing advice. Does anybody else get investing advice on their Facebook algorithm? So I get investing advice and I get morning routines of random people that I don't need to know about. Those are like apparently the 2 things that I'm interested in, and hair loss cream. I'm just telling you what's in my Facebook algorithm. I don't know who's watching me, but somebody's watching me. And so all this investing advice has popped up as the markets have fluctuated. And everybody, when they think about investing, what they want is that one thing, that one stock, that one GameStop thing to invest in, to get really rich really, really quick. And what we learn is that the reality is that happens just very rarely. It's like winning the lottery. Like, it rarely happens. If we think about the people who have made the most money in stocks, generally, they're people who have invested over the long term. If you think about somebody like Warren Buffett, somebody who's worth $150 billion, that's billion with a B. Warren Buffett made his first stock purchase when he was 14 years old. He invested when he was 14 years old. But Warren Buffett made 99% of that $150 billion after age 65. So after most people are retired, Warren Buffett made most of his fortune. And he did that through the power of compounding interest. That compounding over time is really what sets you up for success. That this idea of compounding, this idea of the long view of investing is really probably the best way to go about this. Now, I'm not a financial advisor, so don't take my advice. Just look it up for yourself, maybe get in some sort of good Facebook algorithm. If you want actual financial advice, consult your financial advisor. I'm just saying that what I see from other people is that compounding interest really matters. For Warren Buffett, it made a huge difference. Of the 400 to 500 stocks that he's owned in his lifetime, the reality is he made most of his money on less than 10 of them by hanging on to them for the long term. So this really small group of stocks made a really big difference. Investors call this the long tail, that there's this long tail of growth to these things. Most of us have a difficult time thinking in terms of the long view. You know, we invest now. We want something now. Our culture tells us that we can have it now, that you can get rich now, that you can have it your way right now, that you can have whatever it is that you need at a quick rate, that you can get it, that you can make it happen, that it's all right there, right in front of you. And so for many of us, it's difficult to think in terms of long term because we haven't seen what that long term might look like. I have no idea what it means to be retired. And so I don't tend to invest in that because I invest in things right now as opposed to investing in my retirement. I mean, I do invest in my retirement, but probably not at the rate that I probably should. It's why when there's a sale on something, we think, oh, I've got to go get it. I'm saving money. Well, no, you're still buying something. You're still spending money. Not taking the long view of the way the world works. You know, I've told my kids lots and lots of times, You need to be smart or athletic, preferably both, because Dad didn't save for your college. I didn't take a long view of what that would mean, of what that investment could be. We often don't think about the purchases that we make, the cars that we drive, the long term, the long view of those things. And we don't think about the long view of our life, because DoorDash will have food to you in 30 minutes. Amazon will get you whatever it is that you want the very next day. Kroger will deliver your groceries within the day. It's incredible to see what we can get right now. And I think it blunts our ability to have the long view of life at times. And this season of Lent, this 40 days, it doesn't feel like very long. And yet it reminds us to have this longer view of life, this bigger picture of the world, by reminding us that there is more to this world. That there is this life and the next life, and that this life isn't everything, that there's a next life, and that this life is a part of it, and it's a long life, and we need to think about the length of that life and how we use that life, but that it's a portion of a longer life lived in eternity. And so the word Lent literally means to lengthen. That's where the word comes from. As we see the days lengthen throughout the spring, Lent reminds us to lengthen our view of what God can do in our lives and in the world around us, to have a bigger picture, a long view of what God is doing in and through us. It moves us beyond 40 days, and it lets us to think about the world differently. It helps to flip the script on this by now world that we live in. Book of Philippians is really a letter. And it stretches our understanding of what it means to be a follower of Jesus, of what it means for Jesus to work in each one of our lives. Now, unlike most of Paul's letters, if you've read Paul's letters, Paul writes to a bunch of different churches. Philippians has a really different tone than all of those other letters. Like it's joyful and celebratory. A lot of those other letters are corrective and direct. I think we need both. But over the next 5 weeks, we're going to spend time walking through this letter. This letter that flips the scripts on some of the ways that we think about Easter, some of the ways that we think about the work of Jesus on the cross and the resurrection. And so let me give you a little background just before we jump in. The Apostle Paul, who used to be the Pharisee Saul until he encountered Jesus in an incredible way. He went from persecutor to follower of Jesus to evangelist to church planter to encourager of the church. And he goes on a number of missionary journeys, racking up about 10,000 frequent walker miles. Okay, so if you're worried about walking from the back parking lot up here, just remember Paul mostly walked 10,000. He took some boats from time to time, but he didn't get miles for that either. So about 10,000 miles that he racked up on journeys to share the gospel, the good news, and churches that he planted in all of these different places around the Mediterranean, Asia, and in Europe. And he continues to connect with those churches through letters, some of which are now a part of our New Testament. And so one of those letters is Philippians. Now, Paul is writing to the Philippians from jail, awaiting his trial and execution. And Paul kind of knows that this is where life is headed. Paul knows that this is what's happening. And so Paul writes from jail to a city that he was in jail and talks to them about the joy of his life, which is interesting. Because for most of us, we wouldn't think that those circumstances would bring about joy. But Paul flips the script on joy for us by anchoring our joy to something that's more than our circumstances. He anchors it to the work of Christ on the cross and the work of the cross on us. So that's where we're going to be going in the next few weeks. But let's jump into this letter. It's starting in verse 3 of chapter 1. Paul says this to the people in Philippi. He says, "I thank my God every time I remember you." Paul doesn't say, "I thank God for all the blessings that I have. I thank God for my life. I thank God for all the things that we often say. God, thank you for this, thank you for that." No, Paul says, "I thank God for you And I'm constantly praying with joy. There it is for the first time. Joy in every one of my prayers for all of you. For all of you. Paul's very specific that it's all of them. Even the people who, there was a little bit of tension in this church. There was a little bit of disagreement. And Paul says, I thank God for all of you. Not just you individually, not just y'all, which is a group of you, but all y'all. All y'all. I thank God for all y'all. Because of your sharing, or that word could be translated partnering, it's the word koinonia. Because of your community, your fellowship, your partnering in the gospel from the first day until now. Paul, let me just give you a little background on this. This is an incredible prayer. Paul thanks God for these people. Okay, now Paul, who was Saul, leader among the Pharisees, would have grown up and prayed a different prayer each and every day. Paul's prayer, when he was Saul, when Paul was a Pharisee, Paul's prayer would have been this: God, blessed are you, God, for not making me a Gentile, a slave, or a woman. Now, if you flip over to the book of Acts at some point, you can do this later, and read chapter 16 of the book of Acts. It's the story of Paul going to Philippi and beginning the church there. And let me just tell you who the first three people who follow the message of Jesus because of Paul's preaching in Philippi are. It's a woman, a slave, and a Gentile. Isn't God good? You want to talk about flipping the script? Paul goes from thanking God that he's not like them, that he's not these people, to thanking God for these people and describing them as partners in the work of the gospel, that we're in fellowship together, koinonia, this deep connection. We're doing the work together. So as yesterday was International Women's Day, ladies, we are doing the work together. And we're so thankful for the ways that you lead in so many ways in sharing the gospel. We thank God for you, for all y'all. So if you felt on the outside, if you felt like you weren't included, if you felt like you couldn't be a part, just know that God invites you in, and Paul reminds us to thank God for the diversity built into the church. A part of this fellowship and participation and partnership in the gospel is that work, thanking God for it. But Paul goes on. This is where I want to hang out for a second. In verse 6, Paul says this: I am confident of this, or I am sure of this. Paul says, this is what I'm sure of, that the one who began a good work among you or in you will bring it to completion by the day of Jesus Christ. I'm confident of this, that the one who began a good work in you will bring it to completion to the day of Christ Jesus. This is like one of those verses that we memorize, that we put on a poster, and it usually has a cat like hanging onto a limb or something, some sort of thing like that. We put it up in locker rooms, like all these different things. This is one of those verses that we memorize as people of faith, but we're not sure what Paul really means when he says this. But this is so important for us. This flips the script for a lot of us, and here's why. In too many church traditions, we're taught to believe that we just need to get people to heaven. We just need to get them saved. That's it. That's our whole job. That's all that we're doing. Just get them to believe in Jesus. And yes, that is so incredibly important. Paul says, he who began a good work in you, that's the beginning point, but that's not the end. God is still at work, and we're invited to be a part of that. We're invited to see God continue to work in our lives. He who began a good work in you. And for me, this verse means I can experience joy right here and right now, even though I'm not there yet. And there can be a lot of places. because I need this word. I need this word from Paul. And I don't know if you need this word from Paul, but I need this word from Paul. And I need this word from Paul on a couple of different levels. I need this word from Paul for me, and I need this word from Paul for you, and I need this word from Paul for us. So I need this word from Paul. I need to understand that he who began a good work in me will carry it out until completion the day of Christ Jesus. The one who began a good work in me is still at work in me. Because honestly, there are days where I'm like, I should really be there by now. Does anybody else have those days? Where I think to myself, like I should be further along in my faith. That's probably not the thing that you wanted to hear from your pastor today. But I have those days where I pray and it just feels like my prayers are hitting the ceiling. Like that's just as far as they get. I feel like it's not doing anything in the world. It's not doing anything in me. I'm just saying words. I have those days where I just get angry for no reason at all. And I think, God, I should be further along than this. I should be better than this. I shouldn't be so angry all the time. I shouldn't get frustrated at the dumbest little things. I should be further along. I should be there by now. Why do I get so angry sitting in traffic? Why do I still feel this need to show up in a certain kind of way in certain situations? Why do I feel this need for other people to see me as some sort of expert or some sort of person who has, is smart in some way? Why do I feel the need to show up like that? Why do I feel the need for other people to see me in a certain way? Why can't I just be confident in who you made me to be? Why do I struggle to feel like I have enough? Constantly feel like I don't have enough. Why do I struggle with that? God, I should be further along than this. And sometimes I just get out of sorts and I get out of whack and I just think I'm not enough. I don't have enough. I can't do enough. I'm not good at this faith thing. I'm not good at following Jesus. And there are a lot of church cultures that will tell you that is it. You're not good enough. And that's true. We're not. But that's good news because grace fills in those gaps. And Paul reminds us that the one who began a good work in you is still at work in you. And so I'm not there yet. But this helps me to take a long view of what God is doing in my life. I'm not there yet. And it's okay. Because God's not done. He's only just begun. God's not done working in me. He's only just begun working in me. So this is good news for me, but it's also good news for you. This is a word that I need to hear when I think about others, and that you probably need to hear when you think about others. Because it's so important for me to remember that God's not done with me, but it's just as important for me to remember that God's not done with you. Because as we encounter people, we kind of get frustrated with them. We're like, can you believe that they, yeah, because God's not done with them. God's not done with them yet. He's only just begun. So when we bump into people who aren't, quite as righteous as we are, they're maybe not as loving as we are, maybe not as whatever as we are, we can remember that God's not done with them in the same way that God's not done with us. This lengthens our view of grace and what God is doing in the world. And just being really transparent, for me sometimes this is so difficult. Some days I feel like I'm up here just preaching my little heart out. And then the back door, somebody will be like, so do you think Jesus really meant that I have to love my neighbor? Because have you seen their hedges? Ugh. Right? Do I really have to love that person? Do I really have to serve in some way? Do I really have to give up my time? Do I really need to be in a group in order to grow in faith? And oh, by the way, Adam, that one random thing that you didn't even realize that you said in the middle of your sermon, I disagree with you. God's not done. He's only just begun, right? God's not done. He's only just begun. It's only just begun in your life. And this is why this is such good news as we think about the relationship that we have, the partnership that we have in ministry, because I tell you this all the time. Great news. I'm going to disappoint you. As your pastor, I've told you this before. I'm going to disappoint you. I just am. Because I'm human and God's not done with me yet. But guess what? You're going to disappoint me too. Isn't that great news? And as long as we can have this longer view of our lives, as long as we can have this longer view of what God's doing in and through us, we can partner in ministry to do amazing things more than we could do on our own. This is what koinonia looks like. It's remembering that God's not done with you and God's not done with me, and that God is still at work in our lives and we're still growing in grace. But I also think this is so incredibly important for the work that we're doing together. This is so incredibly important for us as a church. This church, right here, right now. I mean, this church is 202 years old. You'd think we'd have it all figured out right now. But the world keeps changing, and we keep changing, and life keeps changing, and lots of things keep changing. But guess what? God's not done with this place. He's only just begun. The impact that we're having in the community is just incredible. The lives that are being changed. I get to hear about it all the time. The people who are coming to know that they can have a relationship with God, and the people in this place, no matter where they come from, no matter what they've experienced, no matter who they are, that they're being welcomed into this place. It's incredible to hear. It's amazing. But guess what? God's not done. He's only just begun. This year, we're going to celebrate 20 years of ministry through Grace Arbor, our dementia respite care that meets Monday through Thursday in our facility here. 20 years is incredible. Guess what? God's not done. He's only just begun with that. This year, we're also going to celebrate 20 years of helping families experiencing homelessness through Family Promise, which is a ministry that really was birthed out of this church. 20 years of helping families. But guess what? God's not done. He's only just begun. And you saw pictures of parents gathering together in community and talking about the challenges of parenting through our Parents First initiative. And part of that Lenten offering that we were talking about, those purple bags where you can put lots and lots of big dollar bills in, or coins, dollar bills. You can put lots of those in those, and if you have your own big purple bag, you should put even more, because I know how much that bigger purple bag cost. If you don't get that, that's okay. If you do get that, fill up the bag. All of that goes to help support, some of that goes to help support expanding the Parents First initiative into other school clusters in our community. Other opportunities for us to gather parents together in other schools, in other places, in Discovery and Collins Hill and Archer and Mountain View. Because God's not done. He's only... That's right. That is such good news for us. Because we have trouble seeing the long view. We want it to be better now. We want it to be there now. We want everything to be done now. And I'm the same way. Like I want to be in all of those places. I want to make sure that our ministry is expanding. I want to make sure that everybody shows up on worship on Sundays and every Sunday feels like Easter. But I got to remember that God's not done. He's only just begun. And this lengthens the scope of our life and our love for others. Because no matter where you are, God is not done with you yet. In our Methodist tradition, we have a phrase for this. We call it sanctifying grace. That God is continuing to work in our lives. And tomorrow and Tuesday, I'll be meeting with candidates for ministry in the United Methodist Church. And if they don't say sanctifying grace, we got a problem. Or if they don't talk about what God is continuing to do in our lives, they've missed this verse. Bill Gates once said that we overestimate what we can do in a year and we underestimate what we can do in 10 years. But I think in our life of faith, it's a little bit different than what Bill Gates said. I think we tend to overestimate what we can do in a year, but we drastically underestimate what God can do in our lifetime. If we allow God to work in us. And it's God's work, and God will bring it to completion. But we get to partner with God in that. We get to be in relationship with God in that koinonia in a certain way. And Paul talks about this towards the end of this passage. He goes on, he says, I'm confident of this, that the one who began a good work among you will bring it to completion the day of Christ Jesus. And it's right for me to think this way about you, because you hold me in your heart. For all of you share in God's grace with me, both in my imprisonment and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel. For God is my witness, how I long for all of you with the compassion of Jesus Christ. And this is my prayer. Listen, this is what I know. Paul says, this is what I know, that God's not done with you. And this is what I pray. This is what I hope happens. And this is my prayer, that your love may overflow more and more, that your love may abound, that it may compound, if you will, that your love may overflow more and more with knowledge and full insight to help you determine what is best, so that in the day of Christ you may be pure and blameless, not stumble, having produced the harvest of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ for the glory and praise of God. This is my prayer, Paul says, not that you get it all right all the time. Paul's prayer is that your love would overflow, your love for others. That the way we're growing in grace is the way that we're loving others, the way that we're making space for them, the way that we're acknowledging that they're not there yet in the same way that we're not there yet, and that we're loving them well right in the moment that we're encountering them. Paul says this is how you know that God is continuing to work in your life, when you become more loving. And love really becomes the basis for everything else that we do. Love is not a byproduct or an outcome. It is the starting point of all that we do. And out of the overflow of love, Paul says, you'll have knowledge and insight or discernment to help you determine what is best. So Paul says, you want to make better decisions in life? Don't get more information, get more love. You want to figure out how to deal with that hard family member? Don't get more information, get more love. Knowledge and insight, knowledge and discernment come out of love. If you want to partner with God and growing towards that person that God longs for you to be, we've got to lean into love. Paul tells these people that God is not done with them yet, and that the best way for them to grow in grace and to produce the fruit of righteousness is to ask this simple question: what would love do in this situation? What would love do? What's the loving thing to do here? How would love engage with this person, with this situation, with this question? You want to talk about flipping the script in our lives. That question has the power to change the way that we engage with others. And if we'll take the long view of this season of Lent as it lengthens the scope of God's work in our life, we can allow love to be the lens through which we make all of our decisions this season. And to remember that He's only just begun. If you're here this morning and you say, I don't even know what that beginning place looks like, it begins by opening your heart to Jesus, by inviting Jesus to come and live in your life and to begin to fill you with the love that helps you grow in grace. So if you've never thought about that, if you've never begun that journey before, today is the day to do that because God's not done with you. He's only just begun.